Hey everybody, today I'm showing you even more ideas with the Neocolor crayons. I got myself another small set. I know that these are available open stock, but I kind of wanted to have them in a tin, which is one of the reasons why I bought this. This also says that it's limited edition and it's in collaboration with this artist, and I really like these colors. Now I feel like the only colors I'm missing are more dirty green tones, like a sap green. So maybe I will buy these open stock. And here I'm using just a sheet of paper on a watercolor pad. The first one is actually not in a sketchbook, but you could do that anywhere, also in your sketchbook. Here I challenged myself to only use these colors, but you can recreate this piece with any colors that you have. And then with the other pieces that I'm doing in this video, I also used the other colors that I had. So it's not only gonna be focused on this set, but I was really excited about the colors in this one. I think they're a little bit repetitive. There's a lot of blue and sort of light teal colors, but I really like those colors. I think if this set had maybe a sap green, then I would be really happy with all of the colors that I have now. I know there was also a limited edition run with warmer colors, but I couldn't find that anymore, so maybe it's not available anymore. And also on my last video, some people commented that you can sharpen the crayons and that there's a palette for them. I couldn't find the actual Caran d'Ache palette. I don't know if it doesn't exist anymore or just isn't available here, but I just bought a very cheap palette that I'm putting the shavings in, and I'm just shaving them with an X-Acto knife because I also couldn't really find a sharpener that would work with them. I don't know if it exists, but I searched for a crayon sharpener and it wasn't available. So I don't know. If you know any of these things, let me know in the comments. But you can see here the piece coming to life. I wanted to do something that's underwater because of all of the colors that we have. And I wanted to do something that's a little bit different to your usual underwater scene. And so I put a little curious cat underwater watching this jellyfish, and I just put this bowl on its head. And yeah, this is probably not gonna work like that, but I mean, of course, a cat underwater doesn't really make that much sense anyways. So this is just a silly, fun little piece where I had a creative idea and just wanted to do it. And I might do more cats exploring different areas. Maybe also space would be fun because that's also an area they're not supposed to be or aren't usually found. We will see, but I'm pretty happy with this one. I think it could have been slightly more dynamic in my execution. I had a few thumbnail sketches for this one and I liked them to varying degrees, and I merged two of the ideas that I had. I think it turned out okay, and the colors are really nice together. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of orange, so that's probably also one of the reasons why I'm not 100% happy with the piece, but it is still a nice, cute piece that is a really fun idea. So I had a lot of fun with this one, just playing around with the crayons. And in the last video where I used them, I used a very rough paper. So this was a bit of a different experience now because this paper that I'm using here is a lot smoother. So you can see the crayons melting much more when I blend them with the water. You can see that there's much less texture still there. And if I wanted, I could have blended the texture out even more just by going over the areas multiple times with my wet brush. But like I said in the last video, I want to have a little bit of that texture still there because that kind of is the point of them. And I'm also using them as is. So I'm using them in areas where I don't blend them. My approach is to start out with just putting them on the paper very lightly and building up the color, blending that out. I'm doing that a bunch of times, just repeating that process. And for the last layer, then I'm putting them on top of that and not blending the last layer in anymore. So that's how I get kind of this mix of the more blended watercolory look, where you don't see the white of the piece too much anymore, of the paper too much anymore. And I'm also getting the texture of the crayons that I want, because that's the reason why I'm using them. And this is very similar to how I use watercolor pencils. It's also similar to how I use watercolor markers. So anything that's kind of dissolves with water is something that I use like that, just building up the layers, blending them, and then for the last layer, I don't blend it anymore. And this is just kind of how I use them, how I would suggest using them. But I've seen people also not blend them at all. Like, any way you want to use them, obviously, is a good way. I find that they're way better quality than just regular crayons, because these just don't have any dust or anything. I haven't tried the Neocolor ones, I think they're called, are the ones that are not dissolvable with water. I've heard that they're a little bit harder, not as soft. I don't know if that's true. I also found that this new pack that I'm using here, all of the ones that are in this set are a lot softer than the ones in the set that I already had. And I don't know if they changed the formula, because the other set, I think I bought it in 2018 or 19 or somewhere around the time. I think 2018 is more accurate. And maybe they changed the formula in that time, or maybe just the colors in this set, because they have different pigments, are a little bit softer. I really don't know, but I did notice that difference, which was kind of interesting. It wasn't extremely different, but I did notice that these are softer. And I find that the softer ones, they feel nicer to use. They remind me a little bit more of oil pastels versus crayons. It really depends on what you want, because for more structured line art, maybe the harder ones would be better. But for playing around and having softer blends, I think those could be better. So it really depends on what you're doing. I don't know if any of you have had similar experiences, if you tried them, if some colors just feel different compared to others. I also didn't notice that any of the lighter colors felt different than the darker ones, for example. Like, all of the colors in this set are softer than all of the colors in the other set. The white from my other set is harder than the lightest blue here. And the dark colors in my other set are also harder than the dark colors here. So it doesn't really matter. It's just this set is different for some reason. I just felt like I wanted to share this here, and maybe you can tell me about your own experiences if you have tried them. And I would also like to know if you've tried any other brands of water-soluble crayons. I've tried other brands too, but I found that I liked these ones the most, and at some point I donated the other ones because I just wasn't using them as much. So I might continue to build up my collection of these, but we will see how often I'm gonna use these, and also how well this video does, because the last one did pretty well, and I don't know if that was just a coincidence or if y'all want to see more of these. If you do, then let me know, and I will put them on my ideas list and create more. I think they're really fun. I use them often in my off-camera sketchbook practice, just when I want something that's a little bit more playful and not as structured. I find for finished illustrations, they're a little bit of a challenge to get them to look precise and the way that I would like a finished illustration to look. For more playing around stuff that you're also gonna see in this video, I think they're a little bit more suitable for that. But even that being said, I think that this illustration, they worked just fine in the way that I was using them. It's just a very doodly piece. It gives it a very playful nature. if I'm using them exclusively. Like I didn't use any other medium here. And so I used them for the line art as well, which is much more chunky than any other line art I would be doing. So I think that makes it look a little bit more playful. Speaking of playful illustrations, if you want to learn how to create this magical and colorful world, then check out my latest art course where I will show you step by step how to create this composition, mix the colors, and refine it all together into something that you're really proud of. And I'm also going to show you and encourage you how you can turn your own ideas into interesting and fun illustrations. I will leave the link to the course in the description down below, so don't forget to check it out. I really allowed myself to play around with the textures, with different lines and shapes. I think that it looks really fun that I sort of framed the piece with the water itself, that the piece doesn't go completely out until the edge. We sort of have this frame at the top, and I also wanted to make the bottom left plant look like it's cut out of the whole thing, so it creates a little bit more of a fun composition. Here is the finished illustration, and now we're moving on to one of my sketchbooks. This one has toned paper, so it looks slightly gray. And here I just really wanted to play around with all of the colors that I now have. So sort of like a swatch page, but completely playful. I can't often be asked to create very detailed swatches. It's just a little bit boring for me. So I think this is an idea for the ones of you who want to create something colorful and see all of the colors that you have in your collection. You could also do this idea with other art mediums. It doesn't have to be these crayons. And it's not as repetitive as creating swatches, but it's also not as detailed as creating a full illustration. It's just a very fun way to play around. I've done similar things to this in my sketchbooks. I think it's very suitable to a sketchbook. If you have a watercolor or at least mixed media sketchbook, then this is really cool because then you can really play around on the paper and it doesn't buckle and warp too much. But even if it's a cheaper sketchbook, if you do something really playful and make sure you don't overdo it with the water, then you can get away with that even in a non-watercolor sketchbook maybe. You could also do something like this with markers or just watercolors and then colored pencils on top. Literally anything. This can be interpreted in so many ways. You can see that I just did these swirls and at first just used the crayons as they were, and then I went through and blended all of that with the water. And I did skip a few of the shapes in between, so I did like every other shape at first so they wouldn't completely bleed into each other. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see all of the individual colors here. But you could also have them bleed together a lot and blend them into each other. That could also really look fun. But it really was a good foundation for what I'm about to draw on top of this. So this is not the full idea. This is just the first main layer where I put down all of the colors. I really wanted to have all of them there. So that's why we also have the browns and the blacks. I don't know if I love these so much on this page, but I just wanted to have a good overview of all of the colors that I now have. And so I did it that way. You can do that with just a few colors, for example, just with warm colors or just with blue colors, or you could use all of the colors that you have. Really, there's so many different ways to do that. It's basically just swirls and shapes, and I am blending all of the crayons into the paper with some water. And again, like with the first idea, I'm not blending it out completely so we don't have any grain anymore, because that's not completely my point here. I want some texture, and here you can already see that I went on top of that as well with the crayons as they are, and this will not be blended in. These are the details, just playful shapes and aspects. This is something that you can do when you feel a little bit blocked creatively, when you can't be bothered to think of an idea and sketch that out and create something super intricate and super smart, when you just don't want to do the performing art, but you want something that is more playful and just have fun and have it on a more low pressure level, then I think stuff like that is really fun and really almost like a mindfulness activity. And you can add as many of these doodles as you want. Here I was kind of making sure that the colors I was using on top sort of went with the ones that were on the first layer. So I did mostly the cool colors on top of other cool colors and warm colors on top of other warm colors, and they sort of meet in this purple section where we have the warm and the cool tones kind of go together. And this way it's not completely mixed up, it's still kind of in a rainbow order. And you can do that in so many ways. You could also pick a color palette and just do a limited color palette and then do the colors all over the page. So here is this page spread. I think it looks really fun and was really fun to create as well. And now for the next idea, I'm using this Paul Rubens paper. You can sort of, kind of see a little bit that it is slightly sparkly. It has this very subtle glitter on it. And I thought that that would be really fun with those playful crayons. And this is also watercolor paper that doesn't have that much texture. So you can see that the crayon dissolves a lot on this paper. I found that it actually kind of mixed almost too much. It worked almost too well because I really had to bring the grain of the crayons back in, and after a few layers you can't really do much texture anymore, because similar to colored pencils, if you push them into the paper, the texture of the paper kind of gets lost, and then when you draw on top of that, it just looks smooth and it's hard to get the texture back. So I would say that now I've kind of reached a point where I found a paper that's almost too smooth for them. Like I said, the paper that I used in my last video was really rough. It was a little bit too rough. This one here is for these almost a little bit too smooth. I mean, it really depends on what you want to achieve. I find that the one that I was using in the beginning was probably a good medium. But I really encourage you to play around with all of the supplies and all of the papers that you might have and try out different combinations, because this is such an individual taste type of thing. I remember that when I was in college and we had to do an illustration, I first did it on a more textured paper with colored pencils, and I hated the texture so much. And the teacher said that it looked good, like he didn't mind it at all. And other people also were creating it on textured paper and they were just fine with that. But I absolutely hated that there was too much texture and too much white of the paper showing through. So I restarted and redid the entire illustration, and I think that it turned out much better the second time. The teacher said that it didn't make much of a difference, but for me personally, it really did. So this is such an individual thing and depends on the art style. This illustration here is really playful, and I wanted it to really look really playful. It almost looks like, it reminds me a little bit of a children's toy for some reason. And I think that in the end, I would have wanted even more texture on it to bring out this playfulness a little bit more. Maybe I will recreate this idea with watercolors on more rougher paper. So just watercolors and no crayons, and do a lot of the watercolor blooming effects and really bring those out, because I think it could add a lot of interest to a piece like this. I really like the idea of this castle on this floating rock, but I think that this piece, for my opinion, turned out a little bit too simplistic in a way. So I'm not 100% happy with how this one turned out. But I want to include also the pieces that I'm not 100% happy with, because I know that that's the only way to battle creative perfectionism, is to just put it out there and just show it people. And there's always somebody. You can see here that I shaved my crayons into the palette. There's always somebody who's gonna comment that this was their favorite illustration of the video, and then if I didn't include it here, then yeah, nobody would have seen it. And even if an illustration is really ugly, which this one isn't, I'm just not 100% happy with it, but even if something is really ugly and I absolutely hate it, I like to include it in my videos just to show you that not everything I create is perfectly flawless, and that's just the attitude that I want to convey. And I want to get more into that again, of also showing the stuff that is maybe flawed or not perfect, because I know that a big reason of why I was dealing with a lot of art block and eventually burnout was because I really forced myself to have this pristine finished art and have everything look really good, because I felt like I had to prove that in order to call myself a professional artist. So I recently recorded another episode for my podcast that I haven't done in so long, and I gonna link that in the description as well, so you can check that out if you're interested in that topic and just overcoming your inner critic and creating stuff. And all of those things is what I'm gonna talk about in the podcast. And also something that I encourage in my art courses, to just don't overdo it and try to be kind to yourself with the results, because even if it isn't completely flawless, you learned a lot from it, and you absolutely have to create bad art in order to create good art, because you have to get out all of those bad things, and you have to allow yourself to make the ugly doodles in order to come up with the cool ideas for the more interesting finished art. And I am creating a lot of ugly art at the moment because it really fuels my creative tank. It really fills it up. And so I am currently on this path of trying to get even more into that and trying to counteract the perfectionism that creeps up, and allowing myself to put everything out there. I mean, not absolutely everything. There's still a filter there, because if you put everything out there, that's the other extreme. But most of the stuff that I create here is also gonna get posted. And I would really like to do another one of those finishing my unfinished artworks videos. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, because I really liked doing that when I did, but it didn't really get that many views. So I don't know if I should prioritize that or not. And yeah, you can see that here that I am kind of finishing the piece by adding a little bit of a background. I felt like it needed it, and I really loved how that looked in the first piece where we had the water sort of looking bubbly, and so I did the same thing here with the sky. I think that it kind of made the composition look a little bit better. With this piece, I didn't really fully plan out the composition. I just played around here and put stuff onto the paper. It shows a little bit, but like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. So here is this finished piece. Let me know if you can see the sparkliness here. Don't forget to check out my course, and if you want to see more creative art ideas, then check out this video next.